In November 2025, I sat with Anette Gehrig, the director and curator of the Cartoon Museum Center for Narrative Art in Basel, Switzerland. The occasion was the opening of the new exhibition by Christophe Blain, Paradis Perdu or Paradise Lost. But our conversation delved into her initiation in graphic art, the origins of this museum, the architecture of the building, and much more. This is Ajita, and you're listening to Conversation with Curators. Miss Anette Gehrig, you are the director and curator of the Cartoon Museum. Before we get into the interview, a bit about your background. You've been associated with this museum for 15 years.
I had the great luck to come to the Cartoon Museum when the museum was sleeping. So I had the chance to bring new ideas in the museum. I'm originally an art historian and I was doing always exhibitions. This was my major field. And I also did my master thesis about exhibition making, and I was writing a lot about exhibition making. What I liked at the Cartoon Museum when I came here is that we have on one side the art of drawing. On the other side, we have the social topics, and comics are always about society. And I like this both sides. Before I did already exhibitions about art and society. I was a curator at the Alpine Museum and I worked with Stadtbauhaus Lenzburg. The Comic Museum opened up when I came here to the contemporary scene.
What motivated you in this direction, steered you? Tell us about your engagement with graphics.
Comics were not seen as a specific art, and this was my first motivation, or is still my motivation, to show comics is art. It's part of narrative drawing, is part of the art history. We are always exhibiting the most innovative, great comics artists. What motivates me also is that in this specific art form, there's always a social critic. Everything is about our life, and telling stories is our life. And this is one thing which makes my work so rich, because when I'm doing 3 exhibitions a year, every exhibition is different. I never will repeat myself, but I still wait with one exhibition. Maybe there's something interesting happening in our world and I choose another artist, or I will always have a program which shows 3 different positions a year. And that makes my work so rich.
This museum began in 1979 with Dieter Burkhardt's donations. Take us through the history of this museum.
Dieter Burkhardt, comics were his passion, but that time comics were not that much popular. He collected out of the New Yorker repertoire. So there were many artists working for the New Yorker that time in the 60s, 70s. He collected already all these historical drawings, which are known for the huge newspaper in the United States, for example, where Winsor McCay, George Harriman, all these huge or well-known comics artists were publishing, because he was living in the United States. But since Dieter Burkhardt isn't here anymore, the collection is more or less history of our exhibitions. We are looking always for that we can invite young artists, or that we can choose works from young artists in the collection, that we don't lose the continuity. But not to forget the history of the museum. The museum is already 46 years old, one of the oldest collections of comics and cartoons, with a collection of 12,000 originals. The Cartoon Museum does 3 exhibitions a year. We have the chance to focus to topics which are connected to our history and combine it with the contemporary. But our idea is to do also exhibitions about the contemporary. What is specific at the art of drawing, and how or where is the innovation of drawings?
And since it started almost 50 years ago, it has been reshaped as the only museum in Switzerland dedicated exclusively to narrative art. What happened in the past 5 decades? What were the high points or the timelines?
The narrative art, as I said, already changed so much, especially here in Switzerland. Young artists are doing much more comics than caricatures or cartoons, or the innovation is in narrative art. That happens the last years. There were so many different topics to create comics. The comic fields is like literature. There are many genres possible. You can have a comic about autobiography, a reportage about what's happening in the Gaza at the moment, about history. So that's a very wide field. The comic got to a wider public. The possibility of art itself, it's not only about drawing. There are a lot of artists doing comics with paintings. There were a lot of more possibilities as the comics got more accepted as art and were taught at art schools. That opened up the field.
This building is called a Gothic style of architecture. If you could talk a bit about the architecture of the museum.
The Cartoon Museum is a very interesting building, a complex building. So we have this ancient part that's a Gothic style connected to a new part done by the well-known architects Herzog and Demeron. What makes the building perfect for comics and for exhibitions, we have 7 rooms that makes it very interesting to create a storyline for exhibition. So in each rooms you can focus on a different topic. It's not one house. We have 2 houses connected with a passerelle. It's a very nice vitrine, which is also very close to comics because the glass, the vitrine, there's always a reflection. So if you look in the windows, you have your mirror. That makes it interesting for comics art because comics is about you, about humanity, about society.
Next year is 25 years of Basel Museum Night. It is a very popular event, not just in Basel, but in the region. And even there are travelers from other parts of Europe coming and visiting. Besides the exhibition, what else is there in the building that a tourist, a visitor can come and check out?
The Long Night of the Museum is a huge event and for us a great opportunity to invite artists. For example, this year there will be coming a young group from the western part of Switzerland, from the French-speaking part, young women artists. There's a lot about different roles, masculinity, femininity. They will do live drawings with the musicians. So this is a live concert the whole night. And we invited 2 caricaturists. They are going to drawings, caricatures of the public, and the public can take the drawings home. And of course, we have workshop. People coming can create comics. It's all about fantasy. It's all about a new vision for our world. Christoph Bla's exhibition, it's a lot about what's happening in the future, except, for example, his last publication about the climate change. So we have this theme, this topic for the night, to involve all the public to dive with us and to think about what's happening in the future. And we have this drawing competition. Our visitors can have this picture postcard and send us a drawing about another day in paradise.
There are also a lot of books published here at the Cartoon Museum. Talk to us about the publishing aspect of cartoons, graphics, drawings.
Every exhibition, I do a long research work on the artist. The publications allow to documentate all these works and all these researches and to keep it or to give it also to people. What I like to do is in exhibitions, I don't like these thick catalogs which you buy with an exhibition and then they stay in your bookshelf. I like to do publication which are on one side a deep reflection, but also show a lot of images too, that people like to have these books always in their hands. So I'm very interested also to work with different designs for publications. For example, for Christoph Bla, we did this little publication which has a specific form, a specific paper, and also how we did the book binding. It's very well done, which is also a part of graphics and comics art. The design of publication reflects also the content of the art of the artist.
It is like every choice, every detail becomes a tiny part of the big art that people don't see about the experience.
That's right. That's good described. Thank you for that.
When people visit a museum, they see the artifacts and they leave. But there is a big team or a small team that works behind. Who works at the Cartoon Museum? Who are the people that keep the show running?
The Cartoon Museum has a small structure. Next to me, there's one person for administration and press, one person coming from university for 2 years, and of course, one person which is responsible for the shop. We have part-time colleagues working in the shop and the reception. And the art education is very big at the Cartoon Museum Basel. And I have the chance to work with 8 art mediators. They work for the museum as a freelancer. But it's a chance. What I like very much on my work is this variation. So I can create the exhibitions, but I also do all the ideas for the art education, of course, with dialogue with the art mediator.
After we come back from the break, we speak about translations in graphic arts, the exhibition Paradis Perdu, the artist Christophe Blain, other activities besides the exhibition that take place at the Cartoon Museum, the 3 exhibitions happening in 2026, and technology and comics. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is the second part of the interview. In its mission or description, the Cartoon Museum also says that each exhibition is designed in a multilingual way for international audience. My question is not just about this translation, but how does art or graphic translate? Does it lose something when it is not done in the origin native language which the artist desired it to? Or people always find through translations context which are more culturally relevant in that particular language? What is your thought on that?
If I would have an exhibition, for example, about the Russian artist Victoria Lomasko, I would work with a curator who knows the cultural environment better than me. That is very important. But to work with a French artist, which art I know very much, and I was living a long time in France. So that's much more easier to understand the cultural context. If I would do an exhibition about Japanese art or Chinese art, I had a curator who is specialized in this specific cultural themes and cultural backgrounds. This is very important to have. And this is what I always do. I invite curators, for example, if there's a context or if there's a lot of research to do. For example, the Alison Bechtel exhibition, I invited a colleague of mine. She was doing a lot of research about all this queer scene. And when I was doing the exhibition about Victoria Lomasko, there was a specialist in Russian history. She helped with the exhibition texts and to translate, of course.
Talking about the exhibition that is currently on, Paradis Perdu. Tell us about the artist and the storyline, the narrative. This would also be on when the museum night happens, so that is what the visitors would be exposed to.
We have chosen the title for the exhibition of Christophe Blain, Paradis Perdu, or Lost Paradises. Tells already a lot about this artist. Christophe Blain is one of the most important contemporary artists because he was starting his career in the 90s. And so he got all this experience already from the 70s and to open up the comics field. For example, when he is working in the Western field, it's not a classical Western. He puts a lot of reflection into Western about contemporary life. It's about family, it's about everyday life, it's about struggles with love, it's about relationships, it's about being a father and how to handle the family, all these responsibilities. So Paradis Perdu, it's like he uses the idea of Western to create an environment to discuss very openly these everyday questions. The main character in this series, it's a painter. He doesn't have much success. And the artist started this story when he was a little bit in depression. So it's also about the artistic fears. This pirate, Isaac, goes on a long journey on a ship. And of course, he met pirates, but it's more about his success and his search for what he's going to want to do in our world. Next to this adventure stories, Christophe Blain, this political satire reflects the time before the Iraq crisis. And that time, the minister, Dominique de Villepin, was 2 years in charge. He is a very strong character, real charismatic politician. And This shows one side of Christophe Blanc, that he can really work with the exaggeration of personalities. He's a good curatorist, but he is not a caricaturist only with one image. He's telling stories in this dynamic and with a lot of speed. His stories. The newer part of his career is documentation. He started with documentation. He was publishing at the beginning of his career a lot of this when he was traveling, and he was also doing documentation when he was at the military, at the Marine. He was documenting all his fears and all his new experiments. And this is maybe because he is so good in doing caricatures or in capturing different characters and people. And the last comic he did was with a scientist, Mark Kovici, and he did a comic about our climate crisis. And this is a fantastic book, how we can understand our everyday behaviors affects the climate change very much.
And this exhibition runs until March in 2026.
The exhibition lasts until 15 March. Christophe Blanc, the exhibition at the moment, is also an innovative artist because he works in all these classical genre like Western adventure comics, but in a total different field. He fills up this adventure stories with our contemporary life. For example, when he is creating cowboys, they are not heroes, they are anti-heroes. They reflect their masculinity, they reflect their relationships with women, they reflect their not good sides, and it's always a play with identity with this exhibition. And that is what me interested a lot. Comics are very social, are very cultural. Telling stories is also telling about life. Like Christophe Blanc, an artist which has many facets, an artist which uses different kind of styles that makes an exhibition very interesting to create in each room, like an intimate situation to dive into the specific theme. But it's not only an exhibition. We do have a lot of conferences and a lot of workshops and guided tours in different languages, also in English, French.
So, talk about these workshops, discussions, film screenings, because this adds a lot of value to exhibitions.
So you can either book workshops on a specific day you want to come, if you want to invite your family, or you're also at work. There's a lot of companies coming doing their events with the teams here, and we do like workshops. I have 8 freelancers working for the museum. They are all comics artists, so we can focus in this workshop on drawing and combine it with the exhibition. But there are specific dates already. We propose you can just come for a guided tour, you can come to an atelier. And there's one huge event, third National Symposium of Comics Art, the 28th of November. This is a huge event at the Kunstmuseum Basel. We are focusing on how has the narrative changed and how do we have to tell stories about our life, about social topics nowadays, because the society has changed so much. The censorship and the self-censorship is a huge topic. This is going to be an interesting, huge day with a lot of invited artists and, of course, the comic scene of Switzerland.
Talking about the preview of 2026, there are 3 artists that have already been chosen who would be exhibiting here. There is Jose Munoz, Emil Ferris, and Barbara Yellen. Is there a common narrative in these 3, or are these 3 completely different from your perspective?
These 3 artists are completely different from their art of drawing, but these 3 artists all reflect about identity in a different way. That's the main theme next year. Jose Munoz was born in Argentina, Buenos Aires, and he has to flee in the 70s when dictatorship came into Argentina. So that's a lot about our situation, our fear about losing democracy. It's a fantastic artist who was doing crime stories, but it's more or less about history. He reflects the history of the 70s and the situation in Argentina. Then the next exhibition, Emil Ferris, is very similar. So Emil Ferris is very interesting artist. She started her career only 15 years ago, and she's going to be 63, and that was one of the huge successes. And as a woman artist, she reflects about identity of femininity and combines this with art history. So all this femininity who doesn't have place in our society and what happened to women is a huge topic in her comics, which is called Monster. I like monsters, and monsters are more or less the inner soul of every human. Monsters reflect our negative sides and our personality. This is a fantastic artist because we also have like lessons in art history. She works a lot with paintings and reflects a lot about art history and combines it with personal questions. Barbara Jelin, she's one of the most important German artists. She did a lot of women portraits, stories about the lives of women. For example, there is a book about a woman who wanted to leave her career and she couldn't do that in a way she wanted to do because the Second World War came in between. But she did her last comic is about democracy, and she also did a comic about a woman who survived the Second World War. Barbara Jelling, she's reflecting about history, about how femininity live their own life in the past history. And her new book is about a woman, a Jewish woman who survived the concentration camp. She tried one thing in her work is how can I describe memories with images better than they were told in words, and how can I find new images to describe such difficult topics like the World War II, to avoid cliches, to avoid images everybody knows, to create a new atmosphere and a new idea of talking about the past.
We are sitting in the beautiful library of the Cartoon Museum. The origin of the museum lies in the important collections of the 12,000 original works, which started in 1979. And there are around 2,000 loans that the museum has to display even more variety. And there are 700 artists that are represented from about 40 countries. There is a huge legacy that you have built, you have shaped for this museum. Very soon it would be 50 years of the Cartoon Museum. In the light of digitization, artificial intelligence, questions about authorship, questions about deepfake, what is real, what isn't, where do you think narrative art form, especially when speaking about designs and graphics, is going in the next few decades? What is your view, given your background, understanding in depth, and such a wide understanding of the global artist scene?
I think it's a good change for comics artists, for artists in any way, because art is going to be more important than ever. If we do have so many technical changes, we are forced to be able to understand techniques. We are forced to understand connotations, and we have to understand authorship. And so this is a very exciting time. We need to take a lot of responsibility. And it's a chance for museums because we are into the digital area. So a museum where you can disconnect and be in a three-dimensional place, and also in conferences or in workshops, you can meet people. So I think that's an interesting phase.
Anette Gehrig, thank you so much for speaking to us. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me. Thank you so much.
This conversation is part of a series where we talk about museums, exhibitions, artists, and curators. See you in the next episode. I'm Ajita, and this is Conversation with Curators.